Hello everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to this hotel and living webinar. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Dan Hodgson. I'm the Lighting Applications Director for ACDC. So we have half an hour together, so let's get going. Before we do, and in case you've missed them, today is our fifth webinar. Obviously today we're focusing on hotel and living. In case you have missed them, you're not aware of them, you can download and view the previous four, where we focused on cove lighting, the how, the why, the where, and then we moved on to architectural lighting. So what are the fundamental ways, what are the methods, what are the applications of architectural lighting? The third one was on bridges. Again, what are those reasons and why and where and how, what should we be thinking about? And then the last one we did at the end of last year focused on plazas and landscapes. Slightly different approach on that one. It was looking at communities, looking at people, looking at the movement of people, how we can light, why we light in the way that we can, and the impact of new technology is having upon how we can change the way we light these spaces. So let's get moving on with hotel and living. So today we're focusing on hotel and living. We're going to be looking at why is light and lighting design so important. We're using light in these spaces to build, to brand a space, to define the identity of the brand and of that space. We're using light to define our experiences, the experiences of the customer. We're using it to define the differences and to deliver personalization. And quite often it's also the reason for coming back as to how and why we're lighting these spaces. We'll talk today about three key elements, and then we'll go into the applications and those different areas and how we can light and why. So we'll talk about identity, we'll talk about experience, and we'll talk about technology. So when we talk and look about identity, we'll look at how we are defining the brand of the hotel, that anticipation, meeting our expectations through the lit effect. It's determined through contrast and that play of light and shadow, and how we're using color and the finish of materials and textures through light. What are we trying to portray through the lit effect? Within experience, we'll look at from that moment we arrive, even from that moment we get off and we get to the airport, or maybe we step off the metro and we see the hotel in view. That experience begins. Maybe it's a high-end hotel and the journey begins with the chauffeur-driven car. Either way, the experience begins with the view, the exterior, the wow, and continues all the way through from the reception, the corridors, the toilets, the rooms, these areas and how they link. What are we trying to achieve through the lit effect, and how might that change over the day? And then we'll look at control, a little bit different to those other two, but this is really important. It's important because when we look at the expectation of different groups of customers and of different star ratings of hotels, the control of the lights and also the opportunities that are now available to us that mean we can integrate light in a way we've never been able to before. So we'll look at the balance and the balance of those layers of light and how that is critical to the identity and therefore the experience of the customer and how we control it. So identity, experience, technology. So let's start with identity. What are we looking to do with our light, with the lit effect of a space? What are we looking to achieve? We're branding with light, we're defining space, the character, the form, and maybe revealing the history through light. And when we put the customer at the center of the journey, the key viewpoints, the facade is at the beginning of the journey. One might suggest that for a luxury remote spa resort in the country, it's the landscape that is key. And it is, and we'll come on to that a little bit later. The facade is the background to our view. It's the destination, our point of direction. It can be the beginning of your time to chill out. It's the start of that hotel experience. It begins to define our opinion of the hotel and how we identify with it and what lies beyond the entrance. We're not going to talk a great deal today about the methods of how we light a facade. We've done that a little bit before. We'll talk a little bit, but that we've done that before. So let's focus on other elements. And when we think about identity and we think about color, materials, and textures, we can use light to define the brand. We can use color and use it for a purpose, not just because we can. For example, this is a Holiday Inn in Singapore, and with those integrated linear luminaires into the architecture, we're framing each level, each reveal. And this can also, the lit effect here can also turn green, should they want it to, in line with brand colors. So then using color to brand, to define. I appreciate that some of you may not be so convinced with regards to color and architecture, and that's absolutely fine. But if we're going to use it, let's use it for a reason, to define the building in the hours of darkness. In direct comparison, you look at this building and its style, its warmth, it's all about luxury. The consistent single color, warm white, defines certain parts of the building. It reveals the building. The subtlety of the lit effect begins to define the identity and our experience. And it's that detailing which is absolutely critical to the success and how we're integrating the light. To some degree, we're not lighting all of the building, but yet we're defining the scale, the height. So identity is about contrast and the beauty that is the play of light and darkness, providing depth and definition through darkness. It's about not being afraid to not light, to light something and not the floor, to allow the spill of light from other areas to come in and maybe help to define the space. We'll talk a little bit later about the layers of light, but I think this image is a definition of layers of light, with the chandelier over the bar, integrated lights under the bar. There's cove lights, there's down lights, there's cracked fiber, there's decorative. I think you're getting what I'm saying here. So, we're using light here, and in terms of that contrast and that depth in darkness. Identity and contrast in light allow us in lighting to show architecture in a very different way in the hours of darkness, to reveal it, to pick it out, to define the beauty of structure, of space. So here, this opera house recently completed by Studio Fractal, using narrow beams, allowing the light to drop off, raising our eye line, and really creating a new identity from the day into the night. And it's about how we're integrating the light into this space. And then as we think about, and we're going to talk a little bit about bars and restaurants a little bit later, but we're using light so that within the same space, over the time of the day, we can change the scene of light and we can create a new identity within a space. There's different people using the space over the day. So let's use the light to redefine that space from day into night. So the way we light defines the identity, the look, the feel. Let's now move on to experience and how through light, through a fully coordinated, multidisciplinary approach, we can capture the journey, putting people at the center of the proposal, defining our experience. So let me introduce you to the rather small but very nice AC/DC boutique hotel. It's a small hotel. It has all of the facilities you may need. From the reception, from the landscape, the facade into the reception area, the atrium, the rooms, conference areas, bars, and so forth. And we're using light to define that experience, to capture the journey. We're revealing the space. We're enhancing it through light. And we're communicating that brand through light. So we'll come on to this a little bit later, but for now, the point here is about the customer journey, from the beginning, our time there, all the way through to the end and paying the bill and leaving. First of all, let's look at context. So when we're thinking about experience and we look at context, this is key to being part of that experience. It determines the views, the reflections, those first impressions, our memories. Whether we're lighting a hotel, a residential tower in the city centre, or remote landscape space, context is so important. What is to the left, to the right, above, and even sometimes below where there is water involved. And this makes sure we're not overlighting, underlighting, we're not pouring light into people's windows, into the night sky. We're focusing the light upon structures and facades. We're understanding the space around the building, and we're lighting it so that it's in tune with its surroundings. Experience and context is critically about the location. Where in the world is it? About recognizing the locality of a project and respecting that. Not providing a generic lighting design, with dots on a plan, but understanding the context of a project, learning about the local culture, local people, the expectations of visitors, and how light is going to place emphasis where it's needed. Picking out the textures, the materials. This means something to customers. It represents a unique definition of the space by the brands. And as we've got here, it's designing a scheme that creates that culturally immersive experience inside and out. So we've talked a lot about the exterior so far, but let's now start to focus on a few examples. Before that, I just want to consider a workshop that we did a year or so ago now. And it was over in Dubai. We invited a number of key clients to these sessions. And really the point of talking about this is that the key outputs of it were very interesting in terms of the difference in the trends and the use of the space and how we're lighting between 5-star, 4-star and 3-star, and the expectations of the different groups, and how also through lights we're kind of responding to that, how through technology we're responding to it and providing the right levels of control. So here, this is some of the outputs of that workshop. So you can see here in terms of those 5-star hotels, it's about luxury, it's about identity, it's about that destination, really understanding the context. And we'll talk a little bit more about 3-star in a little while, but this is about the millennials. It's about those short, sharp city breaks that we book and that we go. And it's about people exploring, and the hotel is not necessarily a destination, where you're spending all your time. You're using it as a point of reference, as a place to stay, and then you're going and then you're exploring. But at the same time, that 3-star hotel may have a really cool bar on the top. It's got maybe some food, a restaurant or a cafe coffee bar on the ground floor, but it's part of the community. So our expectations of these two types of hotels are very different, and the people that are using it are also very different. So let's start to look at a couple of examples. So here, this is the Studio M hotel. So what we'll do here is we'll just talk about that complete experience. And you can see from the open public areas of this hotel, it's all about communal space, multi-use space, from the breakfast space to informal meeting bar tops. From a lit effect, it's more ambient in its appearance, maybe a little cooler as well, crisper in its color, temperature and finishes. It's a very different look and feel. And when you start to look at 3-star, as I was talking about, you might have in these areas a rooftop terrace bar. It may have a really cool dining experience. Identity is essential, but it's how we identify with it. And it's about that new generation. It's about that generation that is creating the culture of now, and it's changing fast. It's about social interaction as well, and the hotel being part of the community. And then maybe let's compare that to the Versace Hotel in Dubai. This is about warmth, it's about luxury. It's the view, the reflection, the build-up of the anticipation, that personal touch, those layers of light controlled by creating balance, visual comfort. It's an immersive environment. And then let's not forget our boutique hotels. That trend for consumers wanting something a little different, for those short, sharp mini breaks, the journey. It's about the reception through to the lobby, the room, the breakfast bar, the rooms, the corridors. There's a clear branding, there's a clear journey. All of these hotels, there's a balance of layers of light. They often have that functional layer that provides a base layer. But they have decorative, let's not forget decorative. That's a key element in terms of that balance of architectural and decorative lighting. They might have integrated lights into the bar, lighting the floor, the bottles, maybe cove lighting that's reflecting light to soften the shadows and model people's faces better and to help define the space. So now we've talked a little bit about identity and the importance of integrating a lighting scheme that brands with light. We've introduced how through light we can define the experiences the customer has and the visual journey that we go on. Let's now introduce that third section of this first phase of the webinar, and that's technology, and more specifically, seamless technology. Because as new technologies, new forms of lighting come into the market, the opportunities for how we integrate are greater than ever. It enables designers to integrate light where maybe it hasn't ever been possible before. And technology is also about control and ensuring that whatever control that is provided is suitable for the audience, putting the individual at the center of our designs. And we'll come on to this a little bit later. The miniaturization of lighting through LED technology has brought the goods and some might say the bads in terms of imports. But for today, let's focus on the goods and the opportunities it has brought the hospitality segment and to lighting designers. We're able to integrate lights now to reveal the detail, to place emphasis on a feature, to frame or backlight an object, to place more emphasis on it in balance with another. Whether it's a bar and lighting the vertical behind, it's about that display of merchandise or artifacts that have a small cove detail washing the back with a miniature point source to the front. We can now play with lights, have a bit of fun, make people look around and appreciate their surroundings, taking it all in. Let's talk about control and people and hotels and that living space. So I'm fortunate in my role. I travel quite a lot. And this is one of my annoyances, So I'm doing this webinar today from Austria. I got in last night on a late flight and walk into my hotel room and, it's 11 o'clock at night, sometimes it's midnight. And that is my point here, thinking about how people use the space, and it's about not overcomplicating. I'm not suggesting these images here are overcomplicating it. It's just making sure that we think about people. We think about the fact that they turn the lights on as they walk in the door, and then they go in, they do whatever they need to, they go to bed, and then they realize they've got to get back up again to turn the switches off because the switches at the door and the switches next to the bed only control the decorative lights. Okay, so maybe that's just my own experience on a regular basis. But it's about making sure that we don't overcomplicate. When we think about those application workshops that we've done before, it was clear that the luxury market expected minimal control, on, off, dim up, dim down, maybe a separate control for decorative and functional lights, if you have them. Whereas in comparison with the 3-star, where there is the younger audience, that audience, to some degree, there is a level of expectation now that they can control the lighting through their phone, through their device. That's okay, and that is what they need. So it's about making sure that the control is the right level of control for the audience. So before we move on to the key applications, let's just bring that first phase to a close. And we're now going to talk about those key applications. So we've talked about identity and branding with light. We've talked about experience and capturing the full and complete journey, and about the opportunities that in technology that are there now to enable the designer to do more than ever before. We've got 30 minutes, so we shall crack on with the key applications. So let's return to our AC/DC hotel. We'll talk through those key areas and just talk about how to light and to some degree why to light as well. So first of all, let's think about the facade. Let's think about how with light we are using and we are bringing architecture to life, using the light to build the intrigue, the anticipation, to define the height, the scale of the building, emphasizing those views from afar. It might be that only the top third of a building can be seen from afar, so let's not allow that to get lost. give it equal treatment, capture the height, create that point of contact, and use the light to capture the beauty, the character of a facade. The Principal Hotel, recently completed by Lighting Design International. This is when we think about the key views and think about context. This is one of the first things the Lighting Design International thought of. It was about that view from Russell Square. Consideration was given to those viewing angles, which were limited to the centre of Russell Square, where there were large trees, and then that started to obstruct the view. So the designers sought to create a simplified approach, repeating those lit effects all the way up and at high level, collectively creating those linear compositions of effects across each level, framing and defining the facades and outlining the architectural form of the building, and bringing in that really warm color temperature of 2700 to really reveal the color, the texture of the facade. So from using maybe more lower output LED luminaires to maybe considering how we can use a smaller quantity of higher output fittings. Broadcasting Tower in Leeds is a bold, twisting corten steel residential block. And by mounting a low level, coming away from the building, grazing up and picking out the underside of those twisted sections with the periphery of the beam lighting the vertical and grazing up, we still have that contrast of that previous example. We have that wow factor. We're capturing the height, the scale of that building. So now let's go inside. What is that first impression we're looking to make? We want it to last. We also want that first point of direction to be clear. Where's the reception desk? How are we going to check in? Use light to bring clarity and direction. Within the lobby of a hotel, what are the features, the architectural style, the finishes, the textures? How can we use light to define these features? We need to consider the balance of those layers of light, as we do for all areas. And this example here shows that internally glowing chandelier taking center stage with that warm inner glow. And then the pillars are picked out with those narrow beam adjustable downlights framing that central feature. Yes, that chandelier will create that low ambient level of light. It's luxury, it's elaborate, but we're using those downlights to define that central space. And when we look at the reception desk alone, whether it's to the apartments, to homes, to our suites, how are we going to differentiate the desk to its surroundings? How are we placing more emphasis? Maybe creating a higher level of light to define it, to create a focus. Whether it's downlight, whether it's cove, whether it's backlit elements, whether it's a decorative feature. It's about guiding the desk. It's about an inviting feeling. It's about that emotional level of light, but it's defining that space. So then we look around, as the customer, we've checked in, we're looking around and taking it all in. If there's an atrium and we look around, how is that atrium lit? Does it benefit from daylight? And then maybe we need to consider a daytime and nighttime scene. Is the atrium open on each level? And then you have the landings of each level there. So it's going to benefit from that in terms of a low ambient level of light within it. Can we accentuate it with color, if that's required? So think about the daytime and the nighttime scene, but also think about people, put people at the center of our designs so that if people are looking down into the central space, let's make sure that the position of those luminaires or maybe the use of accessories, we're controlling the view into the light source. So it's about that grand gesture and maybe uplighting this space. It can be about integrating light on each level, but it's about framing it. It's raising your eye line to the height and the scale. So we've talked about the facades, we've checked in, and now it's about getting to our room. It's about the steps, it's about the corridors, it's about the lift lobbies, and it's about that journey and using light to define our direction. And we're using it in terms of continuing that brand as well. continuing that mood. And yes, it's important that we do think about efficiency, and we think about those functional levels where and if we need to. So the point here is about continuing that theme, continuing that mood, so that from the reception up and onwards, we're continuing that journey, we're capturing it throughout. And then we go on to the rooms. You know, a room, it's about personal. It should be about ours. That light is ours. That space is ours. You know, to some degree, it's that home away from a home. It's about personal comfort and enjoying that space. A room should respond to the needs of the people and the individual person using it, whether it's to relax in the bath or to work and have focused time. The lighting and the choice of the lit effect should reflect that and be able to provide scenes of light and that switching arrangement, enabling the day and the nighttime scene, shifting the focus maybe from work to a personal space, and using light to define the space. A recessed and integrated solution enables sufficient reflected light to be provided with that low glare approach, ensuring that seamless integration and visual comfort of light within the space. So it's about providing that high quality modeling of body and face, and thinking about the position. If we're using downlights, don't put a downlight over the bed, because if we turn it on in the middle of the night and it pours into our face, then that's not great. So, you know, thinking about the placement, thinking about the integration of lights, and thinking about the experience of people and how it can and should be controlled. And then, you know, when we think about integrated light, you know, and how, so here you can see this is from a 3-star, more, let's say, boutique hotel. So this is about thinking about textures and finishes. And so often now within these spaces, you know, it's very different. So it may be exposed concrete with a graphic applied, and then there's integrated lights within the paneling. And if this room is a base from which we explore, then the bed and peace and quiet is one of those most important things. It's about a base. So as you can see here, there are still numerous layers of light incorporated, but it follows the theme that I mentioned about using new technology of incorporating light into the furniture, modeling the space, using reflected light alongside modular furniture. So, you know, we've checked in, and maybe we're using this hotel for a conference. We're using this space for a meeting. It could be a larger conference. And my point here is about, you know, let's think about people's health. I'm sure, like me, you have been to a hotel and you've been in a room, you know, and so often within these places, the same people are in these spaces all day, maybe from breakfast through to lunch until maybe even an evening meal as well with clients for discussions and presentations. So lighting is critical. You know, making sure that people are kept alert, that they're kept focused. So again, this comes down to the control of the light, enabling the focus of the room to shift maybe from presentation mode to general light mode, responding to daylight. So it's about it being personal. And by that, I mean making sure that you're having a good time, that you're alert, that you're that it's what this space is working for you. But it's about that light. It's about creating scenes of light that respond to our health, so that we are performing within these spaces to our best. And likewise, when we look at the other end of the spectrum of a conference space, you know, whether we're talking about a ballroom that's used for weddings, for functions, for award ceremonies, you know, my point here is that they are multifunctional spaces, and lighting must be able to be adjusted and focused to create new scenes of light. Maybe it's dynamic. Maybe we need to consider color change within a cove and that sort of thing. So it's about control. Maybe it is about colored lights to respond to the needs of branding and commercial reasons. So we're talking about weddings, awards, large conferences. The lighting is key to setting the scene. So We've checked in, we've gone to our room, we've talked about corridors, maybe we've gone to a meeting, a conference. And now it's that time to relax, and it's about light providing comfort. And whether that's the bar, whether it's the restaurant, maybe it's even the landscape space and beyond. And these areas are often about how it changes over time. An in-house bar and restaurant often has its own identity. It's about a change in ambience, in style, in lit effect. The light defines the brand again. And maybe there is that daytime to nighttime scene, changing the mood of the space from business meeting ambience to maybe personal, first dates as the evening draws in. We often talk about this scene of light, which is the whiskey scene. And as the bar or the restaurant goes on into the evening, into midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, people are still there, they're still spending money, but the light is really warm, it's really cozy. There's pools of light on the tables. It's so controlled, it's so dim, but it's about it being personal. It's people's space, it's their space. And it's how light really defines that from day all the way through and into night. It's about a low glare solution. It's about integrated light, and it's those layers of light in balance with each other. It's that play of light as well. And as we think about different spaces within a hotel, yes, they do have multi-purpose needs. They do have multi-purpose uses. The open lounge is a typical example where guests relax, they read, they prepare for a meeting, they wait for friends, they're there for a short time, long time, having a coffee. They might have breakfast there, they may have short meetings there. My point here is that it's a multi-use space that evolves over the day. And it's about, architectural lighting, integrated lighting, decorative lighting. And it's that balance of those layers of light that allow that space to evolve over the day that is so important. Different time, same space, new people, new function, it evolves. And that lighting is just so key as to how we perceive that space, how we use that space over the period of a day. So we start to create new focal points. We start to create new destinations within the hotel itself. And that day into evening service is so important when we think about the restaurant and we think about how that evolves over the day. We've talked about it for the conference space, we've talked about it for the atrium, we've talked about it for the rooms, the control of the light from the day into the evening, the different use of the space, the different people using it. And we change the identity, we change the experience, that from that lunchtime, maybe business lunch, through until that personal time where we've got more time to dwell, to relax, to enjoy. And light is critical to that. And it's that play of light of the decorative with the architectural all the way through. And it's that play of balance of those layers which really defines that space. Now, don't worry, I don't need the toilet, but let's focus on toilets. Very easily and very often forgotten. But my point here is about making sure we retain the brands. We don't lose focus of what the brand is, what it brings, what it can do within a toilet. Toilets, bathrooms, they're often spaces that aren't considered as well as they should. People spend a lot of time there. They talk to their friends, and it's a space, that people will come back to, and it should reflect the brand of the hospitality. It has the potential to leave a very positive reaction with people. It's a key focus, but when we think about people and we think about standing in front of the mirror, these are those key elements about how do people look? Are we modeling their face really well? So how can we provide that diffused level of light onto people's face with maybe some light from behind as well? And even in the cubicles, maybe it's an integrated cove detail to provide that soft ambient level of light so that it's not long shadows. Some of this is very simple. I know, I get that. But this is about just making sure that we're putting people at the center, that we're modeling people's faces, their bodies, and the shadows of their nose doesn't go down to their toes. So it's about consistency. It's about the brand, and it's about the consistency of that journey and capturing it all the way through. And likewise, let's take that, not necessarily how we light a toilet, but my point here is that extend that brand into the landscape. If there is a plaza, if there is a garden, let's extend the view. Let's use light to extend the view. So in those winter months, we are sat inside, maybe in the restaurant, and we're looking out of the windows whilst we're having dinner. Let's light that landscape. Let's create a view beyond a view. And if it's in the summer months, let's start to create a journey. Let's, encourage people to get out there, to go for a walk and to enjoy that space. And this is also about creating height and depth in our views from low level. And maybe this is where we've got some low level bollards just to create a soft ambient level of light, defining that route, helping our sense of orientation and direction, leading us through an open space, maybe to a piece of sculpture and artwork. And then we're creating destinations. We're creating that point of destination, that point of arrival. So it is about creating height, it's about creating depth, and it's also not being scared in terms of that darkness, allowing the light to drop off. And it's how we light this landscape. Are we up lighting into the trees or maybe coming down through the trees to create that moonlit effect? So it's extending that journey, extending the experience of the guests so that they really enjoy and capture all of what the hotel is and can be providing. And then let's not forget things like the pools and the space around the pool and that destination and how we're lighting those spaces. Of an evening, people want to relax, they want to chill out. So, really simple here. Yes, we've got candles. Yes, we can use candles. And it's integrated, like maybe here you've got a way around the pool, whether it's cool light, whether it's warm, but it's about a balance, allowing the light to drop off. It's putting people at the center. When they're in this space, in the hours of darkness, what are they looking for? They're looking just to relax, to chill out, and that level of light and just reducing it right down. It's that similar theme I talked about earlier in terms of that whiskey scene. It's just a controlled ambient level of light. So I think this is where we'll begin to conclude the webinar to today. So, what we've tried to get across here is that when we're lighting these spaces from the facade, the landscape, the reception, through and beyond, it's about capturing the complete journey. It's about allowing bars, restaurants to maybe break out of that norm, to create their own brand within the hotel. And it's about how we respond in terms of how we're lighting to different client groups and how we're allowing technology to work with those customers, to work with those people. So we're using light to create an identity, to define the brand. We're using light to create a new experience. Everything from that cafe, maybe on the ground floor, through to the bar on the rooftop. And then everything in between. And that differs for a 5-star, of course, as well. And using technology, using it to really bring new technology in and integrating light where we can, and control is so important. So just to finish up before we finish today, so what is coming from AC/DC? If this webinar has been of use to you or you want to know more, we'll be releasing our new segment guide focused on hospitality and living over the next week or so. So if you want that, please give us a shout. And in addition to that, you may or may not have seen the new fitting from AC/DC. It's called Mondo. It's a wall mount and it's a bollard. Yes, a bollard from AC/DC. It's an incredible fitting. So if you get the opportunity, try and get to see that as well. But for now, thank you for your time. If you have any questions, by all means, email me. You can see that below. And other than that, then I thank you for your time today. And I wish you a good day and good evening. Cheers, guys. Thank you very much.